Hola and welcome to Josef's Model Railway and Toy Room. Thank you as always for joining me. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You don't need to like, follow or subscribe. I just put these videos out there where I can and have a holly jolly great time doing so. Now, in today's video, we're going to keep it pretty quick because a lot has been happening that'll unfold in lots of videos as we go on. So as you breathe in this snapshot, there's a lot you're wondering, he hasn't talked about some of these things yet. Don't worry, they're all coming up. But today's video is going to be a quick one because I'm probably just debunking a myth. We're going to come back and discuss the electrical wiring in a little more detail as we carry on. We've touched briefly about using distribution points and what we're going to do. And certainly, as you can see below me and across the bottom is a lot of droppers or track feeder wires to feed the power to the tracks. Remember, I'm not doing automation and I'm not doing block detection, so I don't need to worry about all those insulated rail joiners and creating these sections. So do I really need to have so many droppers wired up? I don't know. But that's what this video is all about. Because for most of you that have just started off with the basic Hornby track mat or a basic oval, you will be well aware that you've got a section of track and on there are two little pins where you push down the spring, connect the power wires up to the track, and you can control your train. And it goes around the oval. And as you make your layout bigger and bigger, it keeps going around. But how far will it keep going before we need additional wire or indeed more power? Remember, those little fish plates that join our track up, there's a lot riding on them. And to any of you seasoned model railway enthusiasts, you will know that relying on fish plates to travel the power is not the best idea. Or is it? So now let's put this dropper wire theory to the test. Just remember the size of this layout. So we have the two lines with the double loop up there, making its way down to the feature section, which is at least 6.5 meters long from memory, and making our way back to another loop coming in at just under 3 meters here. So we've got a total of 3, 6, and 5 is what we're working on. So we multiply that by 2 and we have a substantial distance we're covering. And of course, as we've always discussed, there are plenty of dropper wires ready to be wired up. But do we actually need them? I've quickly cleared off most of the layout now just to have a quick demonstration and see how this is going to work. And also just to ensure that we've got our geometry and wiring correct before we proceed. Ah yes, no tripod. We're getting a bit primitive now, but that's because I want to capture the essence of what we're actually doing right in the moment. Because what's actually happening while we're testing things, you are now joining me and witnessing the very first time that we're actually going to run a train on the completed track. This is certainly not going to be the official opening, commencement, or maiden voyage. We are just simply testing to make sure a locomotive can go around in either direction and that the wiring works, because I need to carry on with ballasting and I just want to make sure before we go any further, everything is working. Ah, there's our trusty tripod over there. But let us come in now and see what we're doing. I've just taken my Hornby Elite DCC controller. Again, as seen in the previous video, we've got a permanent home for it in the drawer over there, which is where all the master bus feeds will come in. But for the moment, I've taken the controller, just put it down here, taken some red and black, and all I've got is a pair of alligator clips that are wired directly to the track. Remembering I'm using a logical system where red is to the cabinet on the outside and black is to track. In other words, black is always facing into where the return tracks travel, so the inside will be black and red always faces out. That's the way I'm doing it because I have this most resplendent red cabinetry, so red to red. Okay, now what we've got here, very primitive, just a pair of alligator clips. That's all I've got. And remember, these are being connected on the siding. So I'm uninterested in running this particular class 37 on either of the two main lines. Remember, the points haven't been wired up to the appropriate point motors yet. You'll see there's a series of toothpicks just holding them into position just to make sure they're not going to move and just stay where they need to be. So in this most basic way, and remembering I'm not even wired to the main section of the track. Of course, we've got the double slip up there. We are hoping to see some power that is going to run the whole way around. And we'll know if there's a problem straight away when we turn the controller on, because the red light will come up and say we have a short. So let us plug in our controller now. Version 1.3, yes, that's right. I've got no problems. Now, this locomotive is number 12. I'm not sure, all I know is I saw there was a label underneath it. So that's what we're going to do. So Loco 12. Okay. Again, track cleaning, which we'll be talking about in another video. I just use pieces of wood. I don't use any chemicals. I don't use sandpaper. I don't use the Peco track rubber. It's just timber. And let me just give you a quick example of that. You can see here that we've got a little bit of grubbiness on the track. So all I do with this little piece of it's just pine. There's nothing fancy about it. I just take it and rub it. And I can feel it until it's gone. And that's all. Nice and smooth. And again, all the tracks need a good clean. But at the moment, we're just, once again, testing if we can get away with just using one set of wires, and we don't necessarily need to do hundreds of dropper wires. We are all about busting a myth here. First of all, I didn't get a red light to say there was a short, so things must be good. Let's see if the locomotive moves. Of course, it would help if you make sure you're running on the right controller. Take two. Pretty good. Let's send him back the other way. Right, I don't have any problems with that. And I think even without going any further in this video, let me just say that for this to have happened, the electrical circuit needs to be complete. In other words, where these are wired, this needs to continue and come back to the beginning for this to work the way it's operating now, especially considering it's wired off to this siding. But now, let us send this locomotive all the way around to see how bad it's going to go. Now I'm going to send it out there with some speed, because I know the track is terrible and we're going to hit some glitches. So we want to just try and keep some momentum traveling with the train. We've also got our incline now. We're going to make our way around. Remember, you're watching it here with me for the very first time that we're seeing this go around. And look, I'm already impressed that we're getting up the hill. And I know there are no coaches. And I think I've made sure there's nothing too close to the tracks. Now again, we're getting to the point on the back line. This would be the single farthest away from any power at the moment. And we've stopped at the halfway mark. Let's see what's going on. If you can probably see how grubby some of the scenery's gotten back behind that track, that's probably what's causing me my grief. It was the class 37. It was the locomotive all along. But the tracks do need a good lot of cleaning. So here you are witnessing the class 08 that I keep using because it seems to be the most easiest one to pick up out of the drawer. And you are witnessing the first unofficial loop around. actually loop number 2 with non-stop running. I put this locomotive on after 2 hours of cleaning and backwards and forwards and stopping and starting and poking a stick in the tunnel. And then thought, perhaps it's the locomotive. It's one of the more older ones. Sure enough, so it is. But the point is, as you can see, we're not having any glitches here. It's happily trundling along. Oh, always the scary part there, isn't it? Oh, good news, there he is. Trundling around nicely. And all we're really focusing on is the ability now we can carry on with the ballasting. Remember, it's going to be a far sight better than what we've seen, certainly where we started here. As we've progressed along, it has certainly become a lot smoother and easier to maintain. But the important thing is, from an electrical perspective, is we just have one pair of dropper wires. So do we really need the others? Well, it's not a bad thing, particularly when points are concerned, because on some of the bigger locomotives and complications, sometimes they struggle to pick up their contacts. Remember, I'm not using ELECTROFROGs on my layout, so I have certainly plenty of bits of plastic that they need to negotiate. But there you go, there's a full loop, so we can officially say that this is going to work. So we shall carry on our ballasting and see where we end up. Well, there you go. We saw a train going around the entire circuit here, using nothing but a pair of black and white standard speaker cables, so to speak, a standard figure 8 cable, and just a pair of alligator clips to join it on the track, not even using the correct power clip joiners that we find in many of the popular Bachmann, Easy Track, Hornby or Peco ranges. But of course I spent a lot of time soldering multiple power feeds to the track. Now I'm not doing complex automation, DCC block detection or anything like that, but I did put a lot of feeds in. So is this a bit of a waste of time or not? Well, not really, because when we are having some sections that are having problems, we will at least be getting power in one direction and or the other direction. And I don't think that's an entirely bad thing. Is it necessary? Is it essential? No. You don't need to have, if you've looked on the back of the Hornby Elite controller and noticed, as we can see in this picture here, the boost option, that does require you to connect into an additional power distribution unit. And that is a story for another day, and I invite you to do your research. Don't just haphazardly plug wires into it and attaching it to your track thinking it's going to fix all your problems. That is definitely not how it works. And I'm a little disappointed the Hornby manual doesn't go a little bit more into depth about how that's supposed to be used. The standard Hornby Elite controller will comfortably run 10 locos or more, and that's being conservative if you're running older ones that are a bit more thirstier with the current usage. Now, remembering the wire coat hanger that we can use as speaker cables, which I always go back to when people spend a small fortune on things like this, it's a whole lot of snake oil. At the end of the day, it's just some copper. So I went around with the meter, as you can see in these next following photos. I then, of course, went around the layout with the multimeter and I probed and checked the voltage and indeed current and resistance across every corner of the layout. And all the readings were exactly the same, which means, yes, those humble little fish plates that make the connection to all the tracks are giving us solid, reliable electric connectivity. Of course, over time, they may shift, they may move, temperatures will cause the tracks to contract and expand accordingly. So that's where these additional rail joiners may correct any anomalies that could happen. But of course, the next thing we're going to need to do is get all this wonderful mess of spaghetti terminated. That's 57 feeds of black and red I have, or 114 cables that will need to be trimmed, terminated, and the appropriate distribution blocks mounted and labeled. So that's what we're going to get up to now. Well, ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, thank you as always for joining me in this video. Again, it's not the official running or opening of the line. It's mostly just to make sure that the wiring process we're attacking does go right. Now, as I made mention at the start of the video, a bunch of wires you can see down here, and perhaps not so many here. That's because I have started the process here. In fact, here's a little snapshot underneath at what we're getting up to, just where our curved viaduct is, and you can see we're starting the process of getting the track wiring. Remember, the track wiring, once that's done, really doesn't need to be touched anymore. Points, once again, once they're in, we really don't need to touch them much more, but I am a little delayed regarding our signal gantries because we are wiring the signals directly to our points. So that's its own little chapter coming up shortly. And of course, the final thing are the accessories, the lights that we run around on the building or yard lights, things like that in the scenery will continue to evolve and change. So that indeed is a series of wiring that sort of I leave toward the front end that's easy to access and build and expand upon as needed. But that's going to do it for once again, yet another video in the series. I hope you've enjoyed it and I'll see you in the next one. Stay safe. Toodles!